Welcome to English with Ian.
Welcome back to Tech Talk Today, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's been on everyone's mind: how AI is truly integrating into our daily lives beyond just our smartphones. Mark, let's kick things off by talking about smart homes. Are we really seeing AI make a significant difference there? Or is it mostly hype?
That's a fantastic starting point, Sarah. I'd argue it's definitely past the hype phase, at least for early adopters. We're seeing more sophisticated automation. Think about systems that learn your routines, not just reacting to commands. For example, your thermostat might pre-cool your house before you even arrive, based on your typical commute time and external weather data. That's a step beyond simply saying, "Alexa, set the temperature to 22 degrees."
So, it's about predictive AI then. Learning from patterns rather than just direct input. That makes sense. But what about privacy concerns? As these systems collect more data about our habits, how do companies balance convenience with security?
Absolutely, predictive AI is key, and privacy is a huge valid concern. Reputable companies are investing heavily in anonymization techniques and local processing. The idea is to process as much data as possible on the device itself, rather than sending everything to the cloud. Plus, giving users granular control over their data permissions is crucial. Transparency is slowly becoming the norm, thankfully.
That's reassuring to hear. Beyond smart homes, where else are you seeing AI make the most impactful, yet perhaps subtle changes?
Good question. I'd say personalized recommendations on streaming services, e-commerce, and even news feeds. We've become so accustomed to Netflix suggesting shows we might like, or Amazon showing us products based on past purchases, that we often forget there's complex AI working behind the scenes, constantly refining those algorithms. It's subtle because it feels natural, almost like the platform knows you.
Right. It's become ambient technology. It's there, but you don't necessarily think about it. That's a great point. Mark, thank you so much for shedding light on these developments.
My pleasure, Sarah. Always great to be here.
Welcome back to the Daily Dose, everyone. We're here again, ready to unpack a topic that's pretty much dominated our professional lives for the past few years: remote work. Tom, you and I have both experienced the full spectrum of working from home, haven't we?
Absolutely, Maria. From the initial novelty and the pajama pants all-day phase to establishing routines, and then, for some, the slow crawl back to the office or navigating hybrid models. It's been quite the journey for millions around the world.
Definitely. I remember that early stage where everyone was just figuring things out. The commute savings, the extra hour of sleep, those felt like immediate wins. What was your biggest initial positive takeaway when you first started working remotely full-time?
For me, it was the autonomy. Suddenly, I had so much more control over my schedule. If I wanted to do laundry during a lunch break, or go for a quick run at 3 p.m. and make up the time later, I could. It felt like I was actually living my life while working, not just working around my life. And honestly, not having to iron shirts every day was a huge bonus.
The ironing, oh, the simple pleasures. For me, it was similar. The flexibility was paramount. Being able to easily slot in personal appointments, or just stepping away from the screen for 5 minutes to stretch or make a proper coffee without feeling guilty. That really boosted my personal well-being. But let's be honest, it wasn't all sunshine and sweatpants, was it? What was the first major challenge that hit you?
Oh, for sure. The biggest challenge, surprisingly, wasn't about the work itself, but the blurring of boundaries. My home became my office, and my office became my home. The line between work time and personal time just completely evaporated for a while. I found myself checking emails at 9 p.m. or working through dinner because, well, The computer was right there. It was hard to switch off.
You've hit the nail on the head there. I struggled with that massively. My living room was my office. My kitchen table was my second office. I had to consciously create a shut-down routine every evening to mentally leave work. Did you find yourself missing the social interaction too? The casual chats by the coffee machine?
More than I expected, actually. While I'm generally quite introverted, those brief, informal interactions, the water cooler moments, provide a surprisingly important emotional and creative outlet. You pick up on so much by just overhearing conversations or having a quick chat about weekend plans. When you're remote, everything becomes a scheduled video call, which can feel very transactional. I definitely missed that organic connection.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, what about the potential for feeling isolated? Especially for people who live alone or who thrive on being around others. That's a very real downside. We often talk about productivity gains, but the human element is crucial.
It's huge, and companies really need to consider that. Some organizations did a fantastic job with virtual social events, team building, even just regular informal check-ins that weren't about tasks. Others left employees to fend for themselves, and I think that's where we saw significant drops in morale and increased burnout. It really showed which companies prioritized their people.
That's a great point. It highlights that successful remote work isn't just about providing a laptop. It's about fostering a culture of connection and support. Now, looking ahead, Tom, do you think hybrid work is the ultimate sweet spot? A bit of office time for collaboration and social connection, and then remote days for focused, deep work?
I'm cautiously optimistic about hybrid. I think it offers the best of both worlds, if it's implemented thoughtfully. The key is ensuring that remote employees aren't treated as second-class citizens, that they still have equal opportunities, access to information, and feel included in discussions. The technology has to be seamless, and the meeting culture needs to adapt so that those in the office aren't just talking amongst themselves, while remote folks are trying to chime in from a small screen.
You've touched on a critical point. Equity. It's not just about where you work, but how everyone is engaged regardless of location. So, for our listeners out there who might be struggling with remote work boundaries or trying to make hybrid work for them, what's one piece of advice you'd offer? We just couldn't wrap up our remote work discussion in one go, could we, Tom? There's just so much to unpack. Last time we talked about the big picture, the pros, the cons, the idea of hybrid work. But today, I really want to dive into the practicalities. What kind of tech, what kind of tools have really become essential for making remote work work?
You're absolutely right, Maria. It's one thing to say, work from anywhere, but quite another to actually do it effectively. For me, the non-negotiables are a reliable internet connection, first and foremost. Sounds basic, but you're dead in the water without it. Beyond that, a good webcam and a quality microphone became surprisingly crucial. Nobody wants to be the pixelated voice in the void on a video call.
Oh, the dreaded pixelation or the echo chamber effect from a bad mic. I think, for me, beyond the hardware, it's the collaboration software. Tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, or Google Workspace. They've gone from being helpful extras to being the very backbone of how teams communicate and share files. It's almost like the digital office space, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's not just about messaging. Features like shared documents, where multiple people can edit in real time, or project management tools that visualize progress. They've revolutionized teamwork. You no longer need to email versions of a document back and forth, losing track of edits. It's all centralized. What about the human element, though, Maria? Have you noticed any specific tech that helps maintain the social fabric when everyone's dispersed?
That's a great point. Beyond the purely functional tools, I think anything that facilitates informal connection is invaluable. Think about dedicated virtual coffee break channels in Slack, where people just chat about non-work stuff, or even simple features like emoji reactions in video calls. They add a bit of personality and immediacy that a typed response can't capture. And shared virtual whiteboards have been a game changer for brainstorming sessions. It almost feels like you're in the same room.
I agree. Those subtle features really contribute to team cohesion. But let's broaden this out a bit. Beyond the tools, how do you think remote work has reshaped society in ways we might not have anticipated? We're seeing shifts in city centres, for example.
That's a massive question, Tom. And I think the answer is still unfolding. But one immediate impact is on urban planning and real estate. If fewer people need to commute into big city centres 5 days a week, what happens to those office buildings? We're seeing conversions to residential spaces or even new types of collaborative hubs. And conversely, smaller towns, once considered commuter towns, are becoming more attractive as people seek more space and a slower pace of life. Tom, last time we wrapped up discussing our hopes for the future. Your call for more immersive collaboration tools, and my plea for better digital well-being. But that gets me thinking about something we haven't touched on yet: leadership in a remote environment. It's one thing to manage a team you see daily. It's quite another when everyone is dispersed. What's been the biggest shift for managers in your experience?
That's an excellent follow-up, Maria. The role of a manager in a remote or hybrid setup fundamentally changes. It moves away from supervision by presence, seeing people at their desks, to managing by outcomes. Trust becomes paramount. Managers have to trust their teams to get the work done and focus less on how or when they're doing it. As long as the results are there, it requires a lot more empathy, clear communication, and setting very explicit expectations.
So it's less about micromanagement and more about empowerment. I can see how that would be a huge adjustment for some leaders, especially those who came up through a more traditional office culture. And what about building team cohesion when you can't just casually grab lunch or have a spontaneous whiteboard session? How do leaders foster that sense of team?
Precisely. Empowerment is key. And regarding cohesion, it falls back on intentionality, which we discussed earlier. Leaders need to schedule dedicated time not just for project updates, but for social connection. Virtual team-building games, informal chat and coffee sessions, or even virtual celebrations for milestones. It also involves being highly attuned to individual team members' well-being, as you can't just pick up on body language or a quiet demeanor in the same way. Regular one-on-one check-ins become even more vital.
That's true. It demands a new level of emotional intelligence, almost. And this brings me to another big question: the globalization of talent. With remote work, suddenly a company in London can hire someone in, say, Lisbon or Buenos Aires without them having to relocate. How significant is this, and what are the unforeseen implications?
This is, in my opinion, one of the most transformative aspects, and it's truly in its infancy. The talent pool has just exploded. Companies can find the absolute best person for a role, regardless of geography, which is fantastic for innovation and competitiveness. However, it introduces complex challenges too: managing different time zones, cultural nuances in communication, legal and tax implications across borders, and even ensuring equitable compensation. Do you pay someone in a lower cost of living country less, even if they're doing the exact same job as someone in a high cost of living city? These are big questions. Absolutely. The hub and spoke model is becoming more prevalent, where companies might have a central office for occasional meetups, but then smaller, localized offices or co-working spaces in different neighborhoods or even different towns. This could lead to a decentralization of talent, which is exciting. No longer do you have to live in London or New York to work for a top company.
Which is fantastic for diversity and inclusion, isn't it? It potentially opens up opportunities to a much wider talent pool, including people with mobility issues, or those who simply can't afford to live in expensive metropolitan areas. It really levels the playing field in some ways. On the flip side, though, it presents challenges for local economies that were heavily reliant on daily commuters buying lunch, getting coffee, using local services.
You're right. There's a rebalancing happening, and it's not just about where people live, but also how they socialize. Fewer spontaneous office encounters mean people are consciously seeking out social connections elsewhere, whether that's through local community groups, sports clubs, or even just more intentional meetups with friends.
Has your own social life seen a shift since remote work became more widespread, Maria? It definitely has. I find myself putting more effort into planning social events outside of work rather than relying on incidental work connections. And there's a new appreciation for those in-person moments when they do happen. There's a certain novelty to grabbing a coffee with a colleague in person that wasn't there when it was an everyday occurrence. It's made me more intentional about my friendships, I think.
I'd echo that. It's almost like remote work has highlighted the value of true in-person connection by making it less ubiquitous. It's no longer just background noise. It's something you actively choose and appreciate more deeply. So, looking forward, Maria, what's one thing you hope to see evolve in the remote work landscape over the next few years?
I hope to see more emphasis on digital well-being. We've mastered the tools, but now we need to master the art of disconnecting. Companies and individuals need to prioritize mental health, prevent screen fatigue, and encourage healthier habits around remote work. Maybe more explicit policies around no meetings after 5 p.m. or digital detox days.
That's a powerful point, Maria. It's about optimizing the human experience within this new work paradigm, not just the productivity metrics. For me, I hope to see more innovation in truly immersive collaboration tools that bridge the physical and virtual divide even further, making those remote connections feel even more real. Think beyond just video calls.
Those are incredibly complex questions, and the answers aren't straightforward. And I wonder, too, about the impact on national economies and identities. If talent is truly globalized, what does that mean for local job markets? Does it drive a race to the bottom in terms of wages for some? Or does it elevate opportunities for others? It feels like it could really reshape global economic power dynamics over decades.
It absolutely could. We might see a shift where traditional brain drains from certain countries are reversed, as people can now work for international companies without leaving their home country. Or conversely, it might accelerate the flow of work to wherever it's cheapest, which could have less desirable outcomes for high-wage economies. It forces governments to think about things like universal basic income or retraining programs to adapt to a potentially fluid global workforce. It's a huge long-term geopolitical and socio-economic challenge, really.
It truly is. And on a more individual level, Tom, we've talked about work-life balance. But some people are starting to talk about work-life integration instead. What's your take on that? Especially in the context of remote work where the lines are so blurred anyway. Is it a healthier approach, or just a new way to work more?
That's a fascinating reframing. Work-life balance often implies two separate scales that need to be kept level, which can feel like a constant struggle. Integration, on the other hand, suggests a more fluid blend, where work and personal life naturally flow into each other throughout the day. For me, with remote work, integration has become almost unavoidable. If done right, it means I can take a longer lunch to run an important personal errand and then work a bit later without feeling guilty, or seamlessly shift from a work call to helping my kids with homework.
I like the sound of that, the idea of less guilt. But it also sounds like it requires a lot of self-discipline, doesn't it? To make sure that integration doesn't just become work bleeding into all hours of your life. It still needs boundaries, even if they're more permeable.
Precisely. The discipline is crucial. It's not about working more hours, but about optimizing your hours to fit your life. It means understanding your own energy cycles, when you're most productive for deep work, when you need a break, when you can tackle lighter tasks, and clearly communicating those boundaries and preferences to your team and manager. It moves away from the 9-to-5 factory model and towards a more personalized, results-driven approach.
That's a great distinction. It puts the onus on the individual to understand their own working style and communicate it. So, Tom, as we look to the future, what's the one thing about the remote work revolution that you think will be its most enduring legacy, beyond just being able to work from home?
I think its most enduring legacy will be the redefinition of work itself. It's no longer a place you go to, but an activity you do. This paradigm shift has already forced companies to rethink everything from office space to company culture, to how they measure performance. It's about flexibility, autonomy, and trust, and I believe those values will continue to shape the professional landscape for decades to come, even as we figure out the perfect blend of in-person and remote interaction.
That's a profound thought, Tom. The redefinition of work itself. And what a transformative shift that is. We've covered so much ground today, from leadership challenges and the globalization of talent to the nuanced concept of work-life integration. Truly a fascinating conversation.
My pleasure, Maria. It's a topic that keeps on giving.
It certainly does. And that's all the time we have for this extended deep dive on the Daily Dose. A massive thank you to Tom for joining me, and to all of you, our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Keep thinking about how work is evolving for you, and we'll be back next week with another thought-provoking discussion. Until then, take care and keep evolving.